This is a lesson to help you understand how to do the development slide for your country report. When we talk about development, you may have heard the terms first world country or third world country. Those are kind of old-fashioned terms. We now use the terms more developed country and less developed country, and anything in between there is considered a developing country. So first, we're talking about, these are all based on the Human Development Index, which is a collection of data that combines many dimensions of development to compare the relative development of different countries. To be considered a more developed country, the average person in the country should be able to live a long and healthy life, be knowledgeable, and have a decent standard of living. So they calculate the HDI by looking at some different statistical categories. So for a long and healthy life, we look at the life expectancy at birth in a country, and that becomes the dimension index called the life expectancy index. To be knowledgeable, they compare the expected years of schooling and the mean or average years of schooling to create the education index. And for a decent standard of living, we look at the gross national income per capita of a country, and that's the total income in the country divided by the number of people in the country. Altogether, that makes the Human Development Index. So when we look at those things, we categorize them with the different numbers. We categorize it into the more developed countries, the developing countries, or the less developed countries. I had my students last trimester compare data on all of the countries that are listed in the United Nations chart that they use for this, and we came up with our own categories for what really is considered a more developed country and a less developed country by saying a third, the top third are in the more developed country area, the bottom third are in the less developed country, and then everybody in the middle is the developing. So, life expectancy is the first category. Children born in more developed countries can expect to live much longer than in less developed countries. Also, less developed countries have more young people, 15 and under, than old people. More developed countries have just about as many young people as old. So here's a map of life expectancy around the world, and you'll see the highest category is above 80. That's that darker green, and we have that in some of these countries in Europe and the countries that are associated with them. So Canada is associated with England, so is Australia, so they get England's statistics on that. The U.S. is slightly below the highest area, but still pretty good. You see the lowest areas are here in Africa. As far as infant mortality, the more developed countries have 8 or fewer babies die in their first year of life. In a less developed country, 30 or more out of 1,000 die in their first year of life. In the less developed countries, more children die from malnutrition, lack of medicine, dehydration from diarrhea, and poor medical practices and such. Infant mortality rate per 1,000 births on this world map, you'll see 0 to 4 is this light green, and we have that again in some of these European and Scandinavian countries. Japan has that, and then the countries that are associated with Europe, Canada, and Australia. The lowest or the highest infant mortality rate, again, you'll see is over here in Africa with this kind of light reddish purple. A little bit over here in Central Asia as well. Okay, the next category is the expected years of schooling. And in a more developed country, it's 14.5 or more years. So if you think about your life, you probably started with kindergarten, and by the time you graduate high school, that will be 13 years. If you had a year of preschool in there, that would be 14. But in the U.S., or in the more developed countries, you're expected to do some schooling after a regular high school level. In a less developed country, it's less than 12 years. If you look at this map, it's a little bit distorted the way they've done it based on starting at the North Pole, it looks like, and then centered on Africa. So the U.S. and Canada are kind of stretched sideways over here, and we're in the 17 to 19 year range. A couple of countries in Europe are in the 20 plus years, and Australia is there as well. The least is here in Africa. We've got a couple of countries that are 5 to 6 years, and then quite a few in the other red and orange categories. The mean years of schooling is the average number of years education received by people 25 and older. So the thresholds are going to be lower here because in the past education wasn't considered as important as it is today. And in the less developed countries it still may not be. It might be more important for those people to be out working in the fields or something than working to earn an income. So it's 7 or fewer years of schooling in less developed countries, 10.5 or more in the more developed countries. Here's a map for the average years of schooling, and it was greater than or equal to 12 in all of these dark brown areas, and less than 4 in these lighter gray areas. And then we have some areas where there's just no data. A lot of these areas in Africa we don't have any information about as far as their mean years of schooling. The GNI is the gross national income per capita, the total income of an economy divided by the number of people in the country. So in a more developed country it's 20,000 or more, and in a less developed country it's 6,000 or less. And you'll see the standard of living in those different types of places are vastly different. Here's a map. In the darker blue areas it's above 42,000. So as far as our categories, anybody in this medium blue, most of the people in this medium blue and then this darker and darkest blue would be considered more developed countries. So look and see where those are, mostly Europe, North America, and then the least developed are below 2,200, and most of those that we see are in Africa. So then, if you combine all of that information, it combines to be the Human Development Index, and that's going to be a fraction or a decimal, so it's the numbers between 0 and 1. The closer you are to 1, the more developed. So from 0.8 to 1 is considered a more developed country. From 0 to 0.6 is a less developed country. And then developing would be 0.6 to 0.8. So the way you're going to show, here's a map that shows the HDI, and it has on a sliding scale here with the 1 and 0.9 to 1 is the darkest green, and again that follows in those Europe and North America areas. Now there was a guy in the 60s that observed that most of these areas were above a certain line. If you come around and include Australia in that, Australia is really part of the British Empire, and so it gets some of the statistics from England, but everything else below that line was a less developed country at that time. You can see some of them have improved since that day, but this is called the Brant line, that shows it used to be really the division between the haves and the have-nots. And fortunately some of the other areas in the world are improving, so it's not as drastic a difference as it used to be. Okay, so here's an example of the slide you'll do for your presentation. This is based on Lithuania. It's considered a developed country. So I went through, and there's a link that you'll have on this slide template that you can click to go to the UN page, and this is the information from the UN page. I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. And so their HDI is 0.869. So we look at which category that fits into, and it would be the 0.8 to 1. So I've just shaded in the rectangle for the column that it fits in. Their life expectancy is 75.7. 76 would be more developed country. They're a little bit low there. So as I put in all of these and then shaded in the area, then my summary is Lithuania is considered a developed country. Its strongest areas of development are infant mortality with just 3.4 deaths per 1,000 infants, and expected years of schooling is 16.5. The area where they need the most improvement is life expectancy, where they are just below the threshold of 76 years. So that's really their only lower area. Everything else would be considered more developed. So on your template, it will look like this, and then down in the speaker notes there's a link to the UN development page that you can go to. Also on your country assignment list, there is a link on that country name that takes you right to the country profile for that page. I'm actually going to back out of the presentation on this so I can show you the whole screen. If you go to this un.org, I think I will just choose a country. Let's say Ghana. That's a country in Africa. And all of the information you need will be here. So here's their Human Development Index. It's 0.596. So if we go back to the slide, we can put in the 0.596 right there. Then infant mortality. To find that one, you have to go into health and open that up and then scroll down to mortality rate infant. This is 35.7. So back to here, 35.7. Expected years of schooling. Oh, shoot. The life expectancy, the Human Development Index is out down here, 0.596. Let me go back to do the life expectancy. Sorry for that error. So life expectancy is the first one here. It's the major category. 63.8 is what we have there. 63.8. Okay, then expected years and mean years of schooling. So if we close up the health one, open up the education one. The top category on education is the expected years of schooling at 11.5. And then the mean years of schooling is down here. Mean years of schooling overall, 7.2. And then the gross national income is, let's see, oh yeah, close up education, and it's right here on the income. It's the main category there. This is 4,099. So 4,099. Okay, so then once you have those numbers, you look and see where they fit. So that is less than 70 years, so that would fit in this one. I'm going to fill the bucket with whatever color I want. I'm going to go with this dark or medium gray blue. Okay, greenish blue. Infant mortality 35 is greater than. Now once I've selected the blue, if I'm just doing this all together, I can do Control Y to do the same thing again. Expected years of schooling, that's less than 12 years. Mean years of schooling, oh, it's a little bit more than 7 years, so that'll be in this category. The gross national income of 4,000 is going to be in that category, and then the Human Development Index is right there. So if I were to summarize that, this is Ghana we're talking about. So Ghana is considered, and the biggest indicator here is the summary one, the HDI, so I would say it is a less developed country. I'm going to take out those other categories. Its strongest, and it doesn't need the apostrophe, that was a typo, its strongest areas of development are, so let's look at what areas we look the best in. It's pretty close in the overall Human Development Index. So the very strongest is the mean years of schooling, and it's really close on expected years of schooling. So its strongest areas of development are in education, where they are almost in the developing range for expected years of schooling and have a mean years of schooling in the developing range. The areas where they need the most improvement are, let's see, infant mortality is a little bit above there. This is quite a bit lower. I'm going to say life expectancy. the area, I'm just going to change it to 1. The area where they need the most improvement is life expectancy. Now there's a good chance that the reason their life expectancy is low there